You're watching Euronews now. I'm Takumbo Silako with your top stories. Emmanuel Macron holds more decisive discussions to end the West crisis with Russia over Ukraine. We'll have the latest from Kiev as the French president meets his Ukrainian counterpart. Also, Chancellor Olaf Scholz faces renewed criticism after a less than convincing pledge to block Russian gas supplies if Moscow launches military action. And we'll take a look at which films will make the cut for the Oscar nominations.
The start of a long day of talks where the stakes are high. French President Emmanuel Macron was on a mission to Moscow to prevent an East-West war over Ukraine. Presidents Vladimir Putin and his French counterpart wrapped up more than 5 hours of talks with disagreements, but an emphasis on the need for more talks. Russia accuses NATO of expanding over the past 30 years to threaten it. But President Macron said he is proposing concrete security guarantees for Russia.
Bâtir ensemble, dans le respect de nos fondamentaux, des garanties concrètes.
Building together in line with our fundamentals, concrete security guarantees for members of the European Union, for countries in the region, Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus and Russia, is precisely the challenge we need to take up. We had a conversation that saw a number of propositions emerge, on which I think, between Russia and France, I can say we converge towards.
Entre la Russie et la France.
Заключение я хочу поблагодарить господина президента за те усилия, которые предпринимает.
I would like to thank Mr. President for the efforts that France, led by him, is making to resolve the acute issue of our relations with NATO.
Нашими отношениями с НАТО в целом.
Issues related to ensuring security, creating an environment of stability and mutual trust on the European continent to resolve the crisis in southeastern Ukraine.
Russia has deployed about 100,000 troops close to Ukraine's border, raising Western fears of a new Russian invasion, something President Putin denies.
If Russia moves to invade Ukraine, NATO and its allies will be ready. That was the uncompromising message from US President Joe Biden as Germany's new Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrived for talks at the White House in a show of solidarity over the simmering crisis.
If Russia makes a choice to further invade Ukraine, we are jointly ready and all of NATO is ready. Today, the Chancellor and I discussed our close cooperation, developed a strong package of sanctions that are going to clearly demonstrate international resolve and impose swift and severe consequences if Russia violates Ukraine's sovereignty and its territorial integrity.
Biden also vowed to shut down a key Russian gas pipeline to Germany if Moscow invades Ukraine.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine. Again, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
But Chancellor Scholz, on his first trip to Washington since becoming Chancellor and under criticism for his response to the Ukraine crisis, was more ambiguous about the pipeline.
As I already said, we are acting together. We are absolutely united and we will not taking different steps. We will do the same steps and they will be very, very hard to Russia and they should understand.
Even before Nord Stream 2 is working, much of Europe is dependent on energy supplies from Russia. Biden has asserted that the US and other countries could make up a significant portion of supplies lost should Russia move to cut off Europe in retaliations for sanctions.
20 Russian warships have crossed the ice fields from the Sea of Japan to the Sea of Okhotsk and across the Peru Strait. The operation is part of a large Russian naval exercise in the area in the South Kuril Islands. The strait is a 42-kilometre-long waterway which divides the southern part of the Russian island of Sakhalin from Japan's Hokkaido Island. Elsewhere, Russian military drills are being carried out in Belarus and near Ukraine amid the increasing tensions between Moscow and Kiev and the West. US media reports that President Vladimir Putin has already assembled 70% of the power needed to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But Putin has denied that's the case and instead accuses NATO of destabilizing the region by providing Ukraine with weapons. It's after the addition of 14 new East European countries joining NATO, which the Kremlin says is a threat to Russia's security. The US Air Force must pay more than €169 million in damages to survivors and victims' families of a Texas church massacre that happened in 2017. It's after they failed to flag a conviction that could have kept Devin Patrick Kelly from legally buying the weapon used in the tragedy. Kelly opened fire during a Sunday service, killing more than 24 people, including 8 children. US government officials have reached a deal to lift the 25% tariff that former President Donald Trump imposed on imported Japanese steel. Washington will suspend the levy on incoming steel imports from Japan up to 1.25 million metric tons a year. The truce allows most steel shipments from the Asian nation to enter tariff-free for the first time since 2018. Austria's popular skiing region of Tyrol is on alert level 4 out of a possible 5. It follows a wave of avalanches. More than 100 have been reported over a space of 5 days. 9 people have been killed. Local authorities say the situation was unprecedented and warned that with high winds and further snow, there could be more avalanches to come. After decades of bullying and harassment inside Parliament House and government offices, Australian political leaders have apologised to staff. It follows an investigation which triggered a former government staffer, Brittany Higgins, to go public a year ago with her allegation that she'd been raped by a more senior colleague in 2019.
I am sorry. We are sorry. I'm sorry to Ms Higgins for the terrible things that took place here. And the place that should have been a place of safety and contribution turned out to be a nightmare.
The investigation had more than 1,700 people making contributions. Ms Higgins was one of 7 women who sat in the public gallery to hear the apology. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, thanked her for her bravery. After declaring a state of emergency in Ottawa, unprecedented protests continue to spiral out of control. The anti-vaccine demonstration has been paralysing Canada's capital for 10 days. It began with the Freedom Convoy, a series of protests by truckers angry at vaccine requirements when crossing the US-Canada border. Now they've morphed into protests against COVID-19 health restrictions and the Trudeau government.
I would die on these streets for my kids and my grandkids to have freedom here. 100%. There's no doubt. Like, we saw people on the side of the street with their signs at 10 o'clock at night, 40 below in the weather, standing there with their signs and telling us that we're their only hope. A bunch of truckers with their hockey sticks and flags. Like, come on. How did we get here? And why? Why did we get to that? How did we...
Hundreds of trucks are blocking the area around Canada's Parliament, and Ottawa's mayor is calling on support from federal authorities. But even the police say they're overwhelmed by the scale of the blockades.
This is crushing for those residents and their businesses. It has to stop, and we are doing everything we can possibly do to stop it. We need more help. We're asking for that help. We're starting to receive that help, but we need more to get this done. Thank you.
Questions from 4 reporters.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is defending the vaccine science. But the opposition is blaming him for a division never before seen in the country.
More news and analysis coming up after the break.